Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Mercy starring Chris Pratt, Rebecca Ferguson. Chris Pratt plays a detective. He is on trial for the murder of his wife, and he claims, I didn't do it. But not that simple. Takes place in the near future, and he stands before an AI judge. He has 90 minutes to prove his innocence, or else he will be killed right there in the chair that he's being interrogated in. He is alone in this room, and everything around him is AI. And the thing about him sitting in that chair, it's a little bit ironic because he is the person who was the proponent of using this system, this justice system that is supposed to be to sentence criminals because AI has no bias. AI can look at all the data, and it doesn't make decisions based on emotions. It only makes them based on the facts. That is what this movie is trying to tell us. It's trying to have a really big message of, should you have any lenience when it comes to somebody suspected of a murder as heinous as killing their wife? Or do you just need to look at data, and is all the proof you need in phone records and text messages and ring cameras, which is what this movie does, because Chris Pratt is essentially sitting in one location the entire time. In order to prove his innocence, he has an entire database at his use, at his fingertips. Even though he is strapped into this chair, he can make FaceTime calls, he can look up phone records, and he is trying to show this AI judge a little bit of his character. And you learn a lot about his backstory, his relationship with his wife. I would like to say this movie had more twists and turns, but really, a very narrow plot. And it is a movie that can get you to the theater on that plot alone because it's really enticing. I often find when you can give a really great elevator pitch to a movie where it's just down packed, you can have it down in one sentence, maybe two. Sometimes that is a sign of a bad movie. It could be a movie that just got greenlit because it checked all the right boxes. You have a big A-list star with Chris Pratt where they put him at the front and center of every poster, and that is how they are selling this movie. It is essentially Chris Pratt versus Rebecca Ferguson the entire time, and everybody else in the cast is really just lower level kind of support here and there. That is where you spend your money. The movie only cost $60 million, which is on the lower end of a mid-range budget movie. So it's not a $100 million big Hollywood blockbuster. You also have to consider coming out in January, which means maybe they don't believe a whole lot in it. Also happened to come out at the time of recording this, going into a weekend where most of the country, at least millions and millions of people around me, are all going to be affected by this big ice storm rolling through. So you have to imagine not a whole lot of people are even leaving their houses right now unless they're going to the grocery store to get milk, eggs, and bread. So when I rolled up to the theater on a Friday afternoon, which is normally a little bit more full, it was so empty. There was more salt in that parking lot than there were cars. I don't think I needed to see this movie on the big screen to really experience it. And I just got flashbacks, you guys. Flashbacks to the worst movie of last year that I talked about recently, War of the Worlds with Ice Cube. Because what you have here is in TV what they call a bottle episode, where you don't want your characters to leave one scene because you can't really afford it. So if you're watching an episode where normally they go to a lot of different locations, but for some reason they have a plot contained entirely in one room, it's because they were trying to save money. One of my favorite comedies, Community, did a whole episode about this, making fun of the bottle episode. But in movies, it's a little bit different. We do have, at times, really great movies that take place primarily in one location. But in the case of Mercy, they're pleading guilty because this was not it. And I knew within the first 10 minutes what I was going to get. And I tried to have a little bit more optimism going into it because I was enticed by the plot. I am not a Chris Pratt hater. And especially when you see him coming off of movies like the Jurassic World franchise, coming off of Guardians of the Galaxy, his star is still super bright. But in this case, it's not his name alone that is going to make this movie any better. It was so predictable that I had it within the first 10 minutes. And I don't like to be that person who is so annoying trying to figure out movies like this and find so much satisfaction in it. But the writing was terrible. Awful. Every character was so poorly written. I will give it to Chris Pratt. If you did not have him in that chair with his acting abilities, it would have been so much worse because he was the only one conveying any kind of real emotion that made you believe any aspect of the story. All the supporting characters were terribly written. His daughter, everybody, bad. Rebecca Ferguson did a pretty good job, but I overall found a lot of flaws with her character of being this AI system that is supposed to be without bias. And that was the entire premise of this movie, that it is this judge who is only looking at the facts. And I found so many plot holes because she wasn't acting, in my opinion, robotic enough. Nothing about that system made me think it was so advanced in tracking down criminals. So it was even hard for me to believe this world that they created. And that's all they had to do was play within their own rules. And it just did not make sense. There were so many plot holes and so many things that were just easily teed up to start getting you to think one certain way, but you knew it wasn't going to go that way. And if you pay attention to all the characters, you, like me, can figure it out so quickly. And by the third act, which it's not even that long of a movie, and I think that's even how they sold the whole thing of he has 90 minutes to figure it out. Well, the movie just happens to be 90 minutes, so it doesn't even happen in real time, which is the other weird thing. But everything just seemed too convenient. All of the performances were so stiff. I was so aware that it was just Chris Pratt sitting in a room with a blue or a green screen. Mercy just felt like a really poorly written Black Mirror episode, which if you look at how greatly produced a Black Mirror episode is compared to something like this, which if you just compare the budgets of a Black Mirror episode to what this entire movie took to make, it is wild and shows you that it's so much more about direction and creativity to creating a captivating story. It's not about having a big budget or an A-list movie star. It comes down to having a vision, and Mercy had no vision. At $60 million, it might as well have just put all that money in a room and set it on fire, because a Black Mirror episode cost 10% of that, and I could watch the worst Black Mirror episode and leave with much more of an impact than I did leaving watching Mercy. At no point was I ever engaged in the story or sold on that it was gonna win me back at the end. Sometimes I can tell from the very beginning just by how many studio logos play before the movie starts, because that just happens to be another random indicator of if a movie is going to be bad or not. If there are 6 studio logos, which I think in this case there were only 4, maybe 5, before a movie plays, that is kind of a red flag. Unless it's just a super independent movie that needed a lot of studios and a lot of production companies involved. If a movie has multiple at the beginning, which it is an MGM movie, so it will be on Amazon probably in 90 days or so, and you won't think any different of it because a lot of Chris Pratt's movies just happen to go on Amazon, and it's going to feel like just another thumbnail up there. I think ultimately this movie did not read the room and thought they could really just put out a mediocre movie with a somewhat decent premise and get people interested in it. But I think the bar has been raised so high when it comes to a story like this. A man accused of murdering his wife is, I think, a topic that a lot of people would be interested in now, want to listen to a podcast about, want to watch a miniseries. And it's not like it's a new concept. I hate to compare it to one of the best movies in this category, but The Fugitive. We've been doing this song and dance for a while now. So if you're going to make a movie like this and give it a modern spin of, okay, everybody's fascinated with AI right now, how it's going to change our lives, how it's going to impact things that we never thought it would impact, like the justice system, and whether or not a person lives or not. That is a big thing. That is something that is a sexy topic and should have made for a great movie. Instead, it was such a snooze fest. I'm glad I took my own coffee with me into the theater. Otherwise, I probably would have fallen asleep. I had that caffeine running through my veins, and even that couldn't get me excited in this movie. It was still full-on nap material. Don't go see this movie in theaters. It is not worth your time, especially if you're thinking, man, I'm really going to brave this storm and try to make it to my local cinema to go watch Chris Pratt in this new movie. Don't do that. If you really love Chris Pratt, which I think he's the only redeeming quality of this, he tried his hardest. He tried so hard. give it maybe 20 minutes. Give it 20 minutes, and if you are still wanting to figure out what exactly happened, finish it to the end when it comes out on streaming. Otherwise, it is going to be a movie you put on and think, what is this? This feels so low budget. For Mercy, I give it 2 out of 5 trials.